I enlisted in the old Army Air Corps in December 1941 when World War II broke out. And I went through boot camp and all the old schools, military schools. And I was a flight engineer on my first duty assignment was flight engineer on the B-25s out of Essler Field, Louisiana. And that was the 12th Bomb Group. And they had sent me out to Mines Field, California to go through the flight school program on the B-25s. And while I was there, I contracted yellow jaundice from overdose of yellow fever shots, so they told me. And I got back to the outfit in Essler Field, and they were packing for deployment to go to North Africa. And obviously I didn't get to go. I ended up 43 days in the hospital at Camp Livingston. My next duty assignment was on B-26 Marauders out of Barksdale Field, Louisiana. And I went through flight engineering school there. And I was a flight engineer on the squadron commander's airplane. And while I was there, I made application for flight school, and I made it. And I turned down another opportunity to really do good at West Point, but I didn't want to do that. And I went through all flight school and graduated out of single-engine fighters in Eagle Pass, Texas. And from there, I went to a Top Gun school in Waycross, Georgia, the bunch of us. We finished there, and we volunteered. Every one of us guys volunteered to join the 354th Fighter Group, which was already in England. And it was a volunteer group. Everybody there, everybody had volunteered to join that group. And they also were the first group to get Mustangs, P-51. And when I got over to England, those guys had never been around a P-51, so obviously we had to check out in a little place up in northern England, and that's where we checked out. And while we were there, the invasion was happening on the 6th day of the month. I believe that's right. Yeah. June the 6th. And about the time we finished, the outfit moved to Cherbourg, France. And that's where I joined them. And I stayed with them, well, I was in combat 1 year. And the outfit was in combat 18 months. And basically what we did, we followed the Third Army, but our primary mission was to go up against the Luftwaffe. And we were the only Mustang group on the continent of Europe. The rest of them were P-47 Jugs. And what we did, we went out looking for airplanes in the air. I mean, that was our primary job. And in the 18 months that the group was in combat, the group shot down 701 airplanes in the air, confirmed. And we lost 63 of our people from weather, combat, or mechanical. And we were strafing, we dive bombed, we did everything that was called upon. And that's really about after I got back into the States on the 17th day of June of 45. And I had a collapsed lung, what they call a spontaneous pneumothorax. And this happened about on my last mission that I flew combat. And I ended up from July 1 until February the 8th of 46 in the hospital. I finally got out of it. Anyways, then I got out. Then I was called back in, backwards and forward, back and forth. And that's basically it. I finally ended up retiring, I think, in 59 or something about like that. That said, I'm from a little town of Quapaw, Oklahoma. And of course, that's a Quapaw Indian reservation too, you know. And when I got to the outfit, and I was assigned my airplane, that's what I named it. And there's a funny thing about that. If you look, Quapaw is misspelled on my airplane. And we had a little Polak boy who did all the painting. He was a great painter, but he was also a little bit of an alcoholic. And I told him, I said, his name was Zobloski, I want you to put Quapaw Squaw in there. Yeah, okay, Lieutenant. And 3 or 4 days later, I'm looking at the airplane, I thought there's something a little different here. And I noticed that he had put an extra W in Quapaw. It's Q-U-A-P-A-W, he put Q-U-A-W-P-A-W. I got a hold of him and come over, and I said, look what you did. And he said, well, Lieutenant, you told me. I said, yeah, but you put an extra W in there. Well, I did, didn't I? I said, yeah. He said, I'll change it. I said, no, just leave it alone. That's the P-51 Mustang.
How did it perform as far as aircraft goes?
Beautiful. It was the Cadillac of airplanes, of fighters. I flew 16 missions in the P-47. They took away our 51s one time. And we flew those for, well, it was during Bastogne. I had 3 hours in the P-47 when I flew my first combat mission against Bastogne.
3 hours?
3 hours. That's all I had in the airplane. And this happened in November when we got those, the last of November. And in January, we got our 51s back. But I flew 17 missions in the P-47, and it was a good airplane. It was a beautiful airplane to fly, easy to fly. But now a P-47 pilot will argue with you about this, but I had the opportunity to fly them both in combat. And that 51, it didn't mush on you. If you was diving, when you pulled back on that stick, you come out of it. Whatever you did, that airplane responded, did everything you asked it to do. And the 47, you had to be a little bit careful. If you was in a dive, if you was diving, you had to allow yourself a lot of altitude because the airplane would have a tendency to mush a little bit. And I had a good friend of mine get killed Christmas morning up at Bastogne. That's what happened to him. He ordered into a mountain up there. I was in what was described as the biggest dogfight of World War II over Karlsruhe, Germany, but I never fired a shot. There was 38 of us out, and we latched on to approximately 100 109s and 190s. And in that engagement, the group shot down 51. Some of us had malfunction of the guns, and I did. I didn't fire a shot. It's much to my dismay. And but they corrected the gun situation. The guns were laying on the side, and they later on they straightened them up, and they put a little motor that was designed by the British that fed your gun belts into your guns. We never had any malfunctions after that. And a lot of guys were shooting with 1 gun, 2 guns, 3 guns. We mounted 6 guns on the 51, and we mounted 8 guns on the 47. But that was pretty memorable.
the mission you talk about that you didn't fire. What's that like, being up in a plane that I mean, you don't have a weapon on you?
I thought my breaker switch, your breaker box was right down there that controlled everything. And I reached down and punched my breaker switch, and it was okay. So I knew that it was in the guns themselves and not the breaker switch. So what happened is, I think, I don't know, electrical thing or whatever it is that makes them run, you know. But it was that was pretty memorable. And then I was into another situation in the same area later on. April the 1st, I guess it was. We had a guy join our group. He was a major. And he had flown a tour or two in the South Pacific in P-38s. I got to know him really pretty well, and I guess he was kind of a quiet guy, never talked much, but he was from Arizona, I remember that. Anyway, he showed up as and joined our outfit, and he was field grade, major, but he didn't have a job. He was just a replacement, and that's what he wanted. And he had about 3 hours in that Mustang. You check yourself out in that Mustang, you got nobody to check you out in it. I mean, and so we were getting ready to go on a mission to look for spearheads of the Third Army. I don't know if you people are familiar with that. Patton was famous for making big sweeps. And at briefing, we were going out to look for spearheads of the Third Army. And there was 8 of us going. And I was the only one that had a lot of time, a lot of missions. And I knew, you know. And he said to me in front of briefing, our squadron commander was there too, that if we get out there, Jim, and he called me Jim, which I appreciated that. And he said, if we get out there and get in trouble, you'll be red leader. Normally the leader is red. The flight center is blue. There was 8 of us. He's red and I'm blue. And if we get out there and get in any kind of a problem, I'll call you, you take over, you're red. I acknowledge that. Well, we got out there and we found what we consider the spearhead of the tanks and stuff. It was a clear day, nice day, and somebody called out bogeys. Well, there were 16 109s above us, and apparently they're coming in to do their job on our people. And so I told them, I said, squeeze in tight, get in tight. We went up through these 16 airplanes. We broke up their formation. And their leader, I would like to shake hands with him later, but I didn't get to. He was flying what they call a Lone Nose 109. It had spoilers, and it could turn just, a dogfight is turning. And this guy, I latched on to him, and the only reason I'm alive today, he just didn't shoot well, but he outflew me for quite a while. And I flew my airplane, I had it on full throttle, and I'm flying with flaps. When you put down your flaps, it's like hitting a brick wall, and it'll give you more turning deal. And this happened, started at about 8,000 feet, and somebody called me and said, Hallam Red, watch your altitude. And my parental view, I could see treetops. We'd come from there to there. And I kept working around and working around and working around. And this guy fired on me 2 or 3 more times. And I thought he'd hit me. I really thought he had shot me up, but he didn't. And anyway, that was a real memorable time.
Veterans Day itself, I'm sure that it probably brings back a flood of memories, and like you said, a lot of pride. But is it all bittersweet when Veterans Day comes around?
Oh, no, not really. It's a day of remembrance, and I don't know. It's everybody. I don't know any guys that was in a combat situation that don't think they're lucky stars in a way, but World War II types, it was a popular war. You guys already know that. It was a popular war. And, I mean, hell, guys like me, we right off the farm, we beat the door down to get in there. I was the first kid to enlist out of Quapaw, Oklahoma, incidentally. I was given some recognition a few years back, and at Tinker Air Force Base, and I got a call from here, and Wilma, my wife, was gone. About an hour later, this guy called, and he said, verified who I was. Yeah. He said he was from the Air Force, something or other, in Washington. And he said, what is the closest air base, military, to you? And I said, we have an Air Guard. And he said, no. I said, well, Tinker Air Force Base. And he said, yeah, okay, Tinker. He said, you're going to be given an award, and wanted to be sure that you know everything. I said, well, what's this all about? And they said, well, that's about all I can tell you. You'll be contacted. And a couple of days later, I get a call from a lady who identified herself as First Lieutenant Andrew Smith or something, I don't remember, and told me that they had been chosen to give me a ceremony on an award. And that kind of threw me, we're talking 60 years later or something like that. And so I said, well, if you have that, why don't you just send it to me? He says, no, that ain't the way it works. You got to come up here. Bring anybody you want to, as many people as you want to, and you set the time. And I did. My brother, who retired out of the Marine Corps, 23 years, he was there. My old commanding officer was there from up in Monument, Colorado. 3 or 4 guys that I flew with, plus among a bunch of guys that I flew with later, not in the military. And it was about 250 people. And it was I got to tell you a funny story. It's a little gross, but it's, I had to send them my bio. And General Hightower had me up on the stage at the podium in front of everybody. And he was reading this. And he come to the point where I had, he said, now he was at Minesfield, California, going through B-25 flight engineering school. And while he was there, he contracted illness, but in spite of that, he graduated. And I said, General Hightower, I said, I'd kind of like to clear the air here on this thing. that wasn't a social disease I contracted out there. And I busted up the whole thing, so it turned out to be a funny thing.
That's funny.
I mean, that's a true story. And we ended up at the bar there, and he said, we were the Red Ass Squadron. And there's the Red Ass up on the wall up there, incidentally. And he said, Jim, where did you all get the name the Red Ass Squadron? And I said, I don't know. I said, Depp, Earl Deppner was my CO. I said, Depp, do you know? And he said, oh, yeah. You know, we were out in Marshfield organizing as a group. And there's 3 squadrons to a group. And there was a 353rd, we were the 356th, and the 355th. And one of them was the Pugnacious Pups, and the other one was the Cobras. And he said, you know, they sent us up to Lenapaw, Nevada, and they were flying them guys night and day. And he said, you remember Pinky O'Connor? And I said, yeah, sure, I remember Pinky, which was another story. And he said, Pinky come down into operations. He'd been in the air and down and up about 12 hours. And he walked into operation, he said, you know, God, my ass is red. That's where we got the Red Ass Squadron. True story.
That's awesome. That's great.
True story.
That is great.
We were a brotherhood. You see about these things on TV, you know, well, it's true. You become very close. You lose somebody, it hurts. I lost a bunch of friends.
You talked about going to the Veterans Day Parade in full uniform. Why do you do that today?
Well, number one, it's almost a duty to give these kids, lines of streets, a chance to see a veteran the way I dressed in World War II. And I feel like it's a responsibility on my part to do that.
You talked about that pride when you put on that uniform. Do you sense that in your other buddies that are out there with you?
You bet. I'm the only one that has on a full dress uniform. I'm the only one.